Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Taco, continuing to work on the reels that Scott sent me, and this one's an unusual one. This is a Penn Bridge City reel, and this is kind of the predecessor to the Penn Delmar. So this one came first. You can generally judge by the handles, and just kind of doing a little bit of research. I don't know where Bridge City is. I mean, there's a lot of interesting names early on in the fishing reel lines, but I don't know which one is Bridge City, so we're going to find out. So this is a very old reel. This is the 1940s, probably, somewhere in there. You want to judge your reel in a couple of things. Are you using this reel as a collectible reel? Are you going to take it fishing? And what's important, what's not about collectible reels and the like? Well, this one's not the best example of the reel. It's got a lot of corrosion. It's got a side plate chip here, wear on the metal parts and the like, and I would hope that this one's going to go fishing again. This one kind of shows its signs of wear, and I guess on a scale of 1 to 10 it's probably a 5. So what I'm going to do for Scott is I'm going to make sure that we do the best to get the corrosion off, to stop it where it is, and make sure that it's mechanically sound. I'm not going to recommend that this be saved or treasured as a collectible, but you could if you wanted to. I checked on eBay. These things are running almost $100 in nice condition. This one's medium condition. I mean, there's no really bad cracks in the side plates. It is working, and by the time we get done with it, it's going to work beautifully. And the good thing is that most of the parts that run for this reel are shared parts with the Penn Seaboy line, the 85, the Penn Delmar line, the 285, and even I'm thinking that the Penn Long Beach line 60 would probably fit this as well. All right, I'm going to use Flitz metal cleaner to help get me started on getting some of this corrosion off, and then we'll come back and we'll show you how the inside is made, how to service this reel if you have it, and how to keep this one fishing. In 1940s, it says this one is about an 80-year-old reel, and I'll bet you tomorrow you go out and catch some fish. All right, I'll be right back. All right, we're back, and for those of you that are interested, I use the Flitz metal pre-cleaner, and that does a good job in a very short period of time. It's a quick spray and a rinse off, and you can see some of that corrosion came off. Some of it's still a little heavy, but you know, that's the years of age on this, and we're going to do our best to clean this as well as we can. All right, we're going to start by taking off the exterior pieces and parts, and let's see if we can find what the right handle that is. And this is a sign of age, because most of the ones that came later have a scalloped handle screw. This one has a traditional hex nut. When I take these off, I'm going to put them into a parts tray so that I can keep track of them, know where they are when I'm done. And I'm also going to take pictures along the way. Now, I'm taking pictures with a video, but I would recommend, if you're doing this and you're not familiar with the reel, that you take pictures as you disassemble so that you know where that is. Now, you can try and yank this up and off, and it might come off. I like to just back off the star adjuster. That will push this handle up and off. You can see it coming up now. And that way I don't risk damaging the pinion gear. So that's off. I'm going to take the star adjuster off. The star adjuster has the insert here, so it will press down on the drag washers and keep this watertight. Now, I always get the question on these reels, should I replace the damaged parts? And I like to think that it's been together and working for, in this case, almost 80 years. I like to leave it together. I'm not one to restore or make these reels showroom new. That's my game has always been about keeping the reels fishing, and so therefore I don't recommend going out and buying all new replacement parts. Now, if you want that collectability, go ahead and do that, but I think there's something to be said about survivors. Okay, on this reel, I did go ahead while I rinsed that off. I went ahead and sprayed all of the screw heads and behind with penetrating oil. If there's one thing I worry about on a corroded reel, whether it's an 80-year-old reel or a 20-year-old reel, it's that the screws have set themselves in, corroded against the other metal parts, and well, the next thing you know, you've got a broken screw head in there. So if I can get some penetrating oil in there ahead of time, I'm going to go ahead and do that. All right, we got 2 more on this side. And the interesting thing about Penn from the beginning is if you know how to work on one of these, well, you can work on just about any of them. They really haven't changed their internal mechanics and designs that much on most of their reels. I mentioned that you could find parts for the 285 or the Penn 65, or any of those would fit the internal design. If you opened up a Penn Long Beach or a Del Mar or a Seaboy from the 1970s, you'd find that same bridge structure in there. The only thing that's different is the anti-reverse spring. Prior to 1957, those anti-reverse springs were flat springs, and in 57 they changed them over to coil springs. Well, typical, you would expect you're going to find some old grease that's dried that needs to be worked on. This is not what I expected. After 80 years, you've got a sharp point on this click tongue. So rare. Anybody that fishes these reels typically will use that click, and that'll wear down because it beats against that metal click ratchet on the back there and wears that point. This is sharp as the day it was made. All right, we've got a lot of dirt, and this looks like seaweed in here. It almost looks like grass. Not quite sure where that reel was stored, but we're going to take a moment here. We're going to clean that. So again, I don't call cleaning an issue with preserving a reel. And I'm going to use a 4.0 steel wool. It's the finest of the steel wools, and I'm going to use a metal cleaner. I'm going to use a chrome polish. It's got a little bit of abrasive in there. And I'm just going to do what that other cleaner could not do. And I think what I'm going to do here, I'm going to stop the video. I'm going to take these pieces off and clean them off of that side plate because I can get a little bit better leverage with it. So we've done a pretty good job here. We were able to get off most of the greening on those posts. And again, that's a combination of the Flitz and a combination of the elbow grease and the metal cleaner. I took the 6 side plate screws out. Notice on the 6 side plate screws that you have 2 short screws. Those belong in the bottom of the reel seat. Then take those parts and put those in there. Cleaned up nicely here. One of the advantages of this reel actually is that that side plate material continues to be that Bakelite or plastic or whatever it is, and it doesn't have the metal trim ring, and well, the metal trim ring from time to time just gets damaged. So let's go over and do the same thing on this side. Then we want to make sure that this all gets cleaned, and to do that we want to take out the 4 bridge plate screws. It's a good time to ask you to subscribe to my channel if you enjoy these types of videos, and if you do subscribe, please hit the notification button. That'll tell you when I'm posting the videos. And I post all kinds of videos. I repair all types of reels, and it's a good forum. If you have questions, you can ask, and you'll get an education in terms of how reels were made, how they come together, and how to come apart for servicing, and how they go back together again for a second chance. Do appreciate everybody who's subscribed, and ask if you haven't subscribed to please do that. It'll help you, and it'll help me. All right, the 4 screws are out. Push the bridge through, and cup your hand, because there is a spring under here, and if you do this, chances are the spring is going to either remain in the case or it's going to remain in your hand. If you are uncomfortable and afraid that that spring is going to fly, put it into a gallon Ziploc bag and then push it through. That way, if it does fly, it's going to land in the bag and not somewhere in your shop. All right, we've pushed that through. As I mentioned, pre-1957 they had these flat springs, and boy, that's a very thin flat spring. That's one of the earliest. I'm going to put that in my parts tray. I'm going to remove the anti-reverse dog, and then we can remove the rest of this bridge. There's a collar, and then there's a main gear. The main gear, I'm sure, has probably got the old leather washers in it. It looks like this has been some time since this one's been serviced. But again, if you can service this one from from the 40s. You can service one of these from the 70s. There's a pin that holds that gear sleeve on. You want to push that pin through. What a joy. Look at that. 40 years later and that pin actually moves. So many times that pin is just worn and difficult to get out. This is a thing to note that that bridge shaft is narrower than more modern bridge shafts, so if you have to replace that gear sleeve, you're going to want to know that it's not the same one. You may have to replace both the bridge sleeve and the bridge itself for today's standards. Very interesting. That pin just fell out. It's a good thing that I have a nice clean board here that allows me to see that. I just want to do one more thing on the gear sleeve now. I just want to run a cotton swab through there to get the old grease out of there. And if you notice that you're having trouble getting that star adjuster off, well, go ahead and use a brush. Grab a wire brush or something and just kind of make sure that those threads are nice and clean so that you can get that back together again. Well, there's more to it than that. There's that same kind of dirt and grease and grime buildup, so push in on your yoke assembly, then you can remove the jack, and you can remove the yoke and the pinion gear, and then you can remove the two springs. I'm going to put those into the parts tray just so I don't lose them. And while I go and work on the gearing in terms of cleaning it up, I'm going to spray this down with some penetrating oil, let it sit to dissolve the greases and dirt and junk that's in here. Alright, we're going to come back to the bridge assembly then. Here's that slot in the bridge assembly. That's where that pin rides from the gear sleeve. So a little bit of grease on here. And then we can reinstall that gear sleeve. And we can find a pin which is on my desk. Put that in so that that holds that tight. Sometimes you may need an assist if you can pull that in with the pliers. And when you do that, make sure that you do not leave this little stud proud of the ridge there, because your main gear will not go back on. We're good there. Alright, give it a spin, make sure that it spins. Now if you didn't take that gear sleeve off, let's say you couldn't get the pin out or something, make sure that you oil that slot. That's what the oil instructions on most of those modern pen reels with the top cap, they'll tell you to oil there. That's where the oil will go, inside that sleeve. All right, I'm just kind of using a wire brush to get the grease out of those teeth, even though those teeth up top here don't do anything. There's no sense leaving old grease in a reel. It can break free, it can clog the teeth of the gears, generally make it perform poorly. So if you can, get that old grease out of there. The other side of the gear is clean, so we're pretty good there. A little bit more here. All right, just gonna set that aside. The yoke collar has a bunch of grease on it. I'm just using this, it's gummy, just using it to scrape it off. Both sides. And once I have it scraped off, we'll do the penetrating oil blast on there. And if you can wipe it down, my preference is to use the least aggressive method to remove the old greases. If you can wipe it down and wipe it clean like that, that's great. If you can't, then go to the steel wools and the like. All right, a lot of old grease on the back of this. Get that off. And let's take a look at those drag washers. So my guess, even though it's a 1940s reel, is those drag washers will be the same drag washers for the Seaboy, the Delmar, and the Model 60s. These are going to be leather. And so here's one of those things. Do you replace? Do you repair? Look at this. After all these years, those leather washers are still flexible. Those can be reused. Peel them off. Make sure that they're flexible, that they're not cracking. If that's the case, that's kind of an argument for keep the pieces and parts that were there. You don't have to upgrade them. And in this case, I'm going to leave them. Now, if they were, there's plenty of times where these will just split and crack. And in those cases, you definitely want to replace. And if it was a collectible reel, you're not going to have points taken off because it has the original washers in it. Some folks will actually go to the extent of trying to find the replacement leather washers. Well, that's kind of a hunt all to itself, but the HT100 washers would fit if needed. And that goes under kind of maintenance and repairs. Nobody's going to worry that you replaced the old washers there. Okay, I've cleaned off the metals. We're going to use drag washer grease just to keep these fresh. I'm going to use Cal's drag washer grease. If you don't have it, don't sweat it. You can always just use fishing reel grease. The idea is that these fishing reel drag washers are porous, and to keep them flexible like you saw, you want to keep them lubricated, and grease will fit into the slots. So I put the grease onto the washer. I use my gloved hand to rub it in, and then if there's any excess on there, you want to wipe that off because, well, it's just going to get squeezed out if you leave it there as excess. The middle washer in the stack is the eared stack. It has an eared washer. It has 2 points which fit inside the main gear. And then this is kind of like rinse and repeat. Last one, we'll do the same thing with the greasing of that. And then we'll put all of this onto the gear shaft. And then I'll put that last one in, which is going to push it down. There is a collar washer on here that we've cleaned off. That's the next piece on. And then we have the collar itself, or sleeve, or ferrule. They call them different things. It's the spacer. Sometimes it's even called the spacer. It's the spacer between your drag stack and your adjuster wheel. That's the one that's going to go through the side plate. I'm just scraping off some of that corrosion on this. Again, I think I want to keep this as original as I can, so I'm not going to replace this with another one. All right, we're almost ready for the reassembly here. Just wipe off that piece. That's going to go on here. Let's show you the reassembly then. It is a little bit different. And what we've done is we've had the penetrating oils sitting in here, soaking the old greases, so that'll come up nice and easy now. You can see how all the grease just kind of comes right out when you use that penetrating oil. Just let it soak, let it do its job. I use it as a degreaser. I do not use it as a lubricant. I do recommend that you only use fishing reel oils and greases when servicing a reel. And I know penetrating oils, they say, the manufacturers of the penetrating oil says cleans and lubes. I do not recommend that for lubing. I'm going to use Penn's Precision Reel Grease. Not because it's a Penn reel, but because it's a fishing reel grease in the reassembly. We'll put a good coating on both sides of the yoke. I'm going to go ahead now and take that pinion gear and do the same thing here. We'll make sure that it gets a nice liberal coating of the greases. Take the 2 springs. One goes in the cavity on each side of the reel. In the middle there's a bearing that's going to hold the spool. tab, so let's put a little bit of grease on that. Slide everything over the top of that bearing. Push down with that and put the jack right back on. I know sometimes people say I go too fast with these. That's what it should look like. Yoke, gear, 2 springs underneath, lubrication inside the bearing, jack hooked over the eccentric stud. And I move fast, but put some oil behind that in the eccentric, and you can move that back and forth here just to work that oil in. Here's your main bridge assembly now. We have the 4 bridge screws out. The 2 threaded screws go on the bottom. So I'm going to start the one on the outside, which is where the anti-reverse dog goes. It's the one away from me. You can tell the difference. There's a stud here where that metal anti-reverse dog is going to go. That's the one where you want to start. Take your assembly. Oops, I want to put a little bit of grease onto the main gear. And you don't have to get the grease in every tooth. Just kind of be liberal with it, but don't over grease. It's only going to throw it off anyway. But a reel like this that's been going for 80 years probably deserves a good amount of grease there. Push down on your pinion gear. Take your bridge assembly and place it in, and then rotate the bridge where it's basically perpendicular and it's holding that gear in place. Go ahead and get the anti-reverse dog. Put that over this screw that you push through the side, and make sure that it's seated into the back end of the main gear where these teeth are, which is where it's going to grab. Get that spring. Boy, that is a very thin spring there, but you know what? It's been working. Spring goes on the top of the dog, wraps behind the post. See if we can do it this way. The spring is laying on the top of the dog here. Here's your post that goes behind, and then it's wrapping onto the side plate here. Once you do that, continue the rotation of that bridge until you line up with the screw head, and then move that screw head, get it started. Now I don't lock it all the way down, I get it started because there needs to be some movement in the bridge so that you can center the other pieces. I'm going to take the partially threaded screw up top. I kind of go north, south, east, west. Those of you that have watched my other Penn videos kind of know that. Fully threaded screw below. These are all just partially started now. I won't tighten any of them down until I have all 4 of them started. Now I have it started, I'm going to reverse the flow. I'm going to go top, bottom. Top, bottom. That'll tighten them all up. I'm going to grab my steel wool here. There's a little bit of corrosion on that back of the sleeve here. Try and get that off. Be careful with these. These shed. You don't want to get any of those steel pieces into the workings of the gear itself. All right, now I can actually read Bridge City on there. That's nice. And before I go much further, I'm going to use a Penn reel cleaner just to squirt on a kitchen scrubby, and that'll take care of some of that other fine grease that's been laying on this reel for some time now. Okay, we're going to shut the camera off here because I'm looking over at the spool and I didn't clean the spool. And you don't need to watch me clean the spool. We're going to do the same thing that we did with the others. A little bit of automotive chrome or metal polish to help remove some of that. And then we'll come back and do the final reassembly. So this is what it looks like before we get started. We'll be right back. Okay, so off camera I did reinstall the cross posts and the reel seat. And now we'll take that spool, which cleaned up nicely. Again, 4.0 steel wool for buffing and a metal chrome polish. It's an automotive one, I believe it's turtle wax. I'm going to put a little bit of grease onto both sides of the spool shafts. We'll take that first one and insert that into the side plate. Next up then, we want to put our star adjuster on. sure that when you put your star wash adjuster on, that it's going on nice and easy in the turning. If it's not turning easy, it's probably cross-stripping. And particularly with these Penn reels and some of the others, you just have to take your time until you have it where you can see it's flush, it's square. Some of these are harder to put on than others due to age. Just be aware. Use your handle as a key, just like you did using the handle or the star adjuster to take the key off before. Use that as a way to put it back on. If you did not take your gear sleeve off at this point, you'd put a dot of oil in there. But we did remove that, so that's not a issue there. I'll find my wrench to tighten this down now. Now you could have waited to put the handle and the star adjuster on until after you install this as the side plate. Sometimes that handle gets in the way of the screws, but I just chose to do that. And here's an example of what I was just saying. Be aware that steel wool does shed, so please clean your boards as much as you can. Shame on me. All right, and I'll line that up. We're going to grab our side plate screws now. And what we're going to do here is the same thing we did with the bridge. We're not going to go in a circular motion. We're going to kind of cross screw these so that you keep equal pressure on the side plate, and don't put it in a position where maybe it's going to cause a problem later on. I've seen a lot of the modern reels have a significant problem with that. You do need to balance that side plate. All right, so I'm going east and west, north and south kind of thing. I'll go down and put a side plate screw in here for the reel seat. And we'll give it a test. Scott, you got a nice reel here. It shows its age. That's okay. And as I mentioned, it's a sought-after reel regardless of whether the condition. Of course, the nicer condition ones are going to grab the most money, but I'm certain you did not pay $95 at the flea market for this, and yet in this condition you probably could get $75 to $95 as somebody looking to collect this series. And there's a lot of pen collectors out there that want to collect every version and variety of the reel that might be seeking this. And a lot of folks that start collecting don't start with the 10 out of 10 or the 9 out of 10 reels. They start by getting one of each, if that's their desire. And then as they find newer or better ones, or they become more affordable, then they move on to replacing the older versions, or the ones that show a little bit more sign of wear or don't rate out as nice. They replace those with the upgraded version, and then they pass the ones that they had that started their collection on to somebody who's starting theirs. So kind of a nice little gesture all around. Let's see how we did now. So we're in the Bridge City, Penn, circa 1940s, wooden handle type of a reel. Certainly spins nicely offline, which means right now this spool should be spinning. So is that spool properly adjusted? There's a little side-to-side play there. You just want a light wrap. This is your adjuster on the side here. Spin it. Look at that. 80 years later, and that spool is spinning better than some of the reels out of the box with some modern reels. All right, that's the free spool release side. This should be the drive side. Beauty. Absolutely beautiful. Make sure that the drags are holding. They are. All those years later, leather drags, doing fine. Scott, you got a nice one here. Okay, if you have any reels that you'd like serviced, well, I do that by mail if you're not up for doing it yourself. If you want to send me an email on to the address on the business card that follows, I'd be happy to provide you reel repair information. Thanks again to our first responders and essential personnel. To everybody, please stay safe, stay well, and stay watching. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.